Welcome to the Autism Blueprint Podcast. I'm your host, Janeen Herskovitz, and it's my goal to help you create a more peaceful home while living with autistic and neurodivergent loved ones. Each episode, we focus on a different room in the house and help you create a peace plan for your home. So let's get started. Hey, friends. Thanks for joining me today. Well, today on the podcast, it's just me. So no guests today. It's been a while since I've done a solo show. So this will be different if we have new listeners, and it'll be the first time that I'm doing a solo show on our YouTube channel. So make sure that you check that out. Links are always in the show notes. So thanks for joining us today. If you listened to our last episode, which is one that I did with my husband, where we talked about our trip to Asheville area, where we had to escape. If you haven't heard it, I'll link to it in the show notes. But this episode today is going to be a little bit of a jumping off from that, in that I'm going to talk about stress management in relation to how I managed my stress after we got home, how basically my whole family managed our stress. But I did want to share that I think it impacted me probably more than I realized that it had. And this can happen when we are in that mode of go, 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 right? If you're a parent of a child with autism or a caretaker of any kind, I know some of you out there are taking care of your children and your elderly parents, things like that. Anytime that we're taking care of someone that can't take care of themselves 100%, we're going to have stress. So our normal as an autism parent is stress on the daily, right? Stress more so than the average mom or the average parent. So just to let you know, if you listened to the last episode, you know that when we got stuck in North Carolina and it took us several hours to get off the mountain, we actually ended up at another Airbnb to kind of lick our wounds and get ready to come back home. And then once we got back home, I would say I kind of fell apart. I don't use that term lightly. It was really, really difficult for me to manage my emotions after that point. And I think in reviewing this with my own therapist, is that it was the straw that broke the camel's back, right? So I already have some difficulty with my son at home at times and trying to make sure he has everything that he needs, and all of that. So then this trip, which I had such high expectations for, right? We were so looking forward to this. Not only were those expectations dashed, but we were in a situation that was literally life-threatening. And I didn't know how we were going to get out of it. And I didn't know how my family was going to get out of it. So that being said, you don't need to be in a life-threatening position to suffer from what's called acute stress or post-traumatic stress. And acute stress is any time where something happens too much, too soon, too fast. So that's usually how I describe trauma. Trauma is really all about your perception more so than what happened. So, for example, during that trip to Asheville, when we were driving, trying to get off the mountain, I was trying to create my son's perspective, create his reality, right? He could only understand so much. He didn't have access to all of the information that we did. We hardly had access to information. But what ended up happening was I could kind of play with his reality a little bit in just reassuring him, everything's fine. We've got this under control. You know, it's going to be okay. I'm going to make sure you're safe. For myself, looking at the absolute reality of it, I was in, emergency management mode, first responder mode, if you would, to try to figure out how do we survive this, right? So being in that position took, I think, all of my mental, physical energy, and I just was like a balloon that like all the air had been let out of after getting home. Um, Knowing this, just because I am a trauma therapist and I help people every day with this, knowing this was a little bit helpful because I was able to understand what was happening to my body. So some signs of stress in general are things like body aches, spaciness in your head, or we call it dissociation. Dissociation is when your brain just kind of checks out. And dissociation happens on a continuum, right? So it could be what they call highway hypnosis, where you're driving somewhere and you get there and you didn't even really pay attention to how you got there because you just know which way to go. Um, your brain kind of had checked out and just done it. Like your body just muscle memoried it through it. Um, at the other end is severe trauma response, where you could be in the middle of a conversation and suddenly zone out. Or you could just be trying to get a task done and it's really hard to pay attention because your brain kind of keeps going offline. That's usually a signal to your body that something isn't quite right. We can only take so much. So our brains are actually designed to dissociate when there's too much. Our bodies are designed to tell us when there's a problem. So we need to listen to that emotionally, physically, all of that. So what I was looking for were those kinds of signs. I did come home with major body aches. I tend to keep everything in my shoulders and neck, so that was really difficult. Um, and I just noticed that it was really hard just for me to function. It just felt like a very deep depression at first. So in recovering from the stress, I did all of the things that I tell my clients to do, and I'm going to share some of them with you, because I thought that this would be helpful. I know I'm not the only one out there that's probably struggling with these things, and like I said, you don't have to go through something life-threatening to have symptoms like these. So our bodies are designed to go into four different states when we're faced with a traumatic event. And I know if you've been on the internet for some time, you've probably learned about them. And if you're in therapy, you've probably experienced what to do about them. And they are fight, flight, freeze, and fawn. And if you haven't heard about fawn yet, I'm going to explain it to you today. So, in fight mode, so our bodies basically will, anything that's coming at us that seems stressful, it doesn't tell you, oh, this is stressful. It tells you, oh, this is danger. So your body gets the signal that this is something that's dangerous and needs to be avoided. So the biggest symptom that we see in traumatic stress is wanting to avoid situations or not go back to a situation. And the reason for that is because your body, doesn't matter how much you tell your brain, I'm safe now, your body doesn't believe it. So we need to convince the body and the brain that you're safe now. That's not easy to do when you're raising a child that needs a lot of help and needs you to be emotionally regulated in order for them to emotionally regulate. So that can be a real challenge. Um, so when your body responds to what's called a trigger, so anything that would kind of trigger the memory of something that happened, you'll go into fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. And so, fight, the first one, is when people will become extra angry over things. If your response is elevated above what would be typical for a situation. So, for example, if I'm trying to cook dinner and I burn it, under any normal situation, I'd be like, oh man, throw it away, start again. Whatever, no big deal. I don't cook well anyway. In my case, I would something like that would happen. I would break down in tears, or I would get really, really angry. Maybe throw a pan across the room. I'm not going to do that with my son in the room, by the way. Don't be calling people on me. But that's what fight can look like. It can look at like tense and irritated and stressed out. You could become aggressive. You could become very controlling. Those are all things that we just can kind of slip into. Um, what can we do about that? Well, when we're in fight, we need to convince our body that we're safe, right? So the best thing to do is a deep breath. And when I say deep breath, you're not just gonna, start breathing in for 5 at least. So you'll be breathing in, holding it for about 3, and then blowing it back out for 5 more. So wherever you are right now, I kind of want you to try that with me, right? It's just going to be a deep belly breath. And when you breathe in, your belly is going to go out. It's going to expand like a balloon. So we're going to breathe in for 5, 2, 3, 4, 5, and hold it. 2, 3, and out. Blowing like you're blowing through a straw. 4, 5. Taking a breath like that, and again, the numbers don't matter. It's just that you're in, holding, and then blowing out. We did this almost the entire time we were in the car. From time to time, I'd go, okay, come on, it's time to take a deep breath again. Not knowing that I would need to do this for the next 6 months or a couple of months, however long it's been. But your breath is going to control your heart rate, which is going to control your blood pressure, which is going to in turn control the anxiety that your body transfers to your brain as danger. So other things can be talking to yourself in a positive way, a supportive network, physical activity, mindful meditation. All of those things will kind of help you to kind of get out of that fight response. Now, the next area, which is flight, is when we feel anxious, panicked, scared, distracted, trapped. This is where dissociation comes in. When our brains check out, when our brains dissociate, we are in flight. Your body is wanting to not be in the situation. And so if you can't physically get out of the situation, your body or brain will check out. This can happen. The actions usually that go along with flight are overthinking, right? How many of us do that? Can't stay still. Maybe you avoid conflict, perfectionism, being a workaholic, and just being in general hypervigilant. So all of those things can be part of what we do when we feel that flight response. What can we do? Again, controlled breathing. Always go to the breath first. Some calming affirmations. So when someone's in flight, when they're extra anxious, when they're panicky, anything like that is going to be, this is where a panic attack would be. Anything like that is going to need slower, quieter. Think about turning the volume down. So and this goes for our kids too. So it's not just for us, but when we see our kids kind of start to melt or start to get agitated, it's really easy to just head right at them and say, oh, what's going on? Tell me, tell me, tell me. And believe me, I do that too sometimes. I have to remind myself, okay, wait, slow down. Just kind of picture that volume button being turned down slowly. Lower the lights. Last night, my son had appeared a little bit agitated. And the first thing I did was I turned off the kitchen light where we were. And we have under counter lighting with an LED strip. So there was still light, but it's not too overwhelming. And we've done these things on purpose in our house so that we can address the sensory needs, which was kind of cool because I really needed it too. The next area of a trauma response would be a freeze response. You guys have seen this in your kids. You guys have seen a freeze response when they become kind of numb or unresponsive or kind of depressed. Actually, I want to make a correction. Yeah, this is where dissociation really comes in strong. So you might, in flight, you might kind of have difficulty concentrating and have some more anxiety than feeling suppressed, right? So when you're in freeze, you're just stuck. And I have people come into therapy saying, I just feel completely stuck. I feel like I don't know which way to go. I don't know what to do. And sometimes that response of feeling stuck is a freeze response, right? You could be depressed. You could be avoiding being with people. You could be really indecisive. It's nearly impossible to make a decision when you're in freeze response. So I've found the last couple of months, which is kind of why we took a bit of a break with the podcast without announcing it first, is that I just couldn't get my head out of that freeze response at times. And these different responses can happen right behind each other too. Like you could have a fight response followed by a freeze response. So it can be really disorienting. And so when you're in freeze or you have a loved one that's in freeze, again, always go to the breath. Holding a safe object or a sensory friendly object. So a fidget or a soft blanket, think about things that will just kind of comfort you in the moment. You can do some grounding exercises. One of the grounding exercises that I really like is one that we call Spot the Rainbow, where you'll look around a room and go through the whole rainbow, red, orange, yellow, green, blue, purple, and find something in the room that has that color. So, if I'm looking for something red, I might be like, oh, that book on my bookshelf is red. Orange. Oh, I have an orange. I have orange on my desk on this piece of paper. And you just go through each one and just recognize and even say out loud where those colors are located in the room. What it does is it brings you back into your body. It brings you back into a state of being present. So anything that you can do to make yourself feel present, a cold drink, even chewing on gum, peppermint, cinnamon, sour candy, anything like that, where you can get your body to kind of come back online. And we don't want to rush this process. A lot of times, I'll give my son a big ball of Play-Doh to squeeze. That helps with flight response and with freeze response because it's helping him get energy out by squeezing it. And it's also helping him come back into his body by being aware of what it feels like, what it smells like. Play-Doh in particular has a really distinct smell. And if they lick it, they won't get hurt because it's non-toxic. You can do that with lots of different things, just depending on what your child likes. And then the fawn response, which is the last one that's just recently been added over the last 5 or 6 years, I'd say, is when we feel overwhelmed and scared. We feel disconnected. We feel burnt out. We feel like we are responsible for things that are happening when we're really not. So fawn is kind of what it looks like is people pleasing. What it looks like is difficulty saying no, not being able to hold your boundaries. It's kind of when we get beaten down in this way, we're feeling this fawn response. We've kind of my family would be like, what do you want for dinner? I'm like, I don't know. I'm probably not even going to eat. Like, it was just this like bleh kind of feeling. Over apologizing. How many over apologizers do we have out there? Probably a lot. It's usually the women in the group, but not always. Where we feel like, we're a burden anytime we have a need, those kinds of things. Now, if any of you are saying, well, gee, this is how I've lived my whole life, these responses. Yeah, a lot of us are. A lot of us are living in a perpetual state of trauma responses, which is one of the reasons why I want to teach you guys about it, because being a therapist and knowing these things so intimately was really super helpful in helping me kind of not only heal from it. And I do have a therapist, by the way. I'm not just like don't try this at home on your own. Being aware of it is only one itty bitty piece of the whole puzzle. So um, all of these things are just kind of good for you to have in the back of your mind. What can you do about a fawn response? Journaling. Journaling is a great way to kind of get your thoughts going again, start feeling like yourself. Um, boundary setting. So if you're not sure about what boundaries need to be set or how to set them, that's also something a therapist can help with. And there's also some great books out there. I'm going to put some of my very favorite books in the show notes that really helped me kind of get through that difficult time. So that if you want to read what I'm reading, you can do that. Kind of this inner child healing. And I know if you guys have heard about inner child work, it's not just a woo-woo term. It's something that really helps with that fawn response. And I think that for me, the fawn response was a really, really big one. And I think I had lived my life a lot in a fawn response, and I'm just kind of learning how to navigate that. Um, we could do a whole episode on inner child stuff, which if you really want it, let me know, and I'll get us a guest that can talk about it a little bit better. But it's basically the idea that if something happened to us as a child, let's say you're 5 years old and your parent left you in an aisle of supermarket and walked away. Okay, just as an example. As a child at 5 years old, you're seeing that situation from the 5-year-old point of view. So you're in, let's say you're in the grocery store, you're in the cereal aisle and you're 5 and you're standing there and you didn't hear your mom say, okay, come with me. And she left. And all of a sudden you realize that your mom's not there. Well, you're 5. So you don't have the cognitive ability to say, oh, she's not here. She must be around the corner. Or, oh, well, she's not going to leave me here. Obviously, I'm her kid. Like you don't have that cognitive ability to make those connections yet. All you feel is panic and fear and where's my mom. So I use that example to show you a couple of things, to show you that 5-year-old has a perspective that's maybe even different from what the reality is, and the perception creates the reality for that person. So no matter what the perception is, if we can change our perception, if we can have something explained to us, if we can be comforted, right? How many times do we try to help our children by explaining things or fixing it for them, right? And while those things are important, they're not as important as what I'm going to tell you to do next. Nurture, comfort, connect. What that child needs is connection with a safe parent. So whether it's your autistic child, your neurotypical child, or yourself inside, right? Because that 5-year-old is still inside you in the form of neural connections and neurons firing or not firing. So that when we get triggered, and sometimes we don't even know what triggers us, our body remembers. And our body goes into a fight, flight, freeze, or fawn response. So these are responses that are not deliberate, right? It's our nervous system reacting and responding. So that's important to remember because you can't just stop doing it. You have to heal. You have to heal that part of you. You have to create new neural pathways. You have to convince your body that you're okay now, that you're safe. And so doing work with that inner child, and it doesn't have to be complicated. If you have a memory pop up that reminds you of something that happened a long time ago, the thing you want to do is the thing that I do. Let's say that. Picture myself at that age. Comfort that part of you that needs comfort by saying something like, it's going to be okay. We've got this. Or, you can even go as far as picturing yourself as your adult self talking to that child. For a little while, I had a picture of myself at a certain age that I was working on with my therapist. And I kept that picture on my desk at home so that I could look at it once in a while and remember that little person that's still inside of me, those neural networks that are still there, need comfort, need me to say, I got you this time. Getting back to my story about a 5-year-old being lost in the supermarket or thinking that they were lost, right? Doesn't matter. Either way, they thought they were. So the comfort that needs to come from that parent when they finally do say, oh my gosh, there you are. What's wrong? Why are you crying? Your response to that child in that moment is going to be crucial as far as whether or not that incident turns into something that's traumatic or something that is workable and fixable. The difference is going to be what response you get. If you run into, if the parent rushes into fix it, if the parent rushes into just come up with solutions and doesn't really comfort that child, and children need hugs. They need to be told, you're safe now. It's okay. They need to be told, you didn't mean to do something wrong, but the next time this happens, here's what you need to do. But in that very moment, they really just need connection and to know that they're safe. So, I have taken these new understandings, I guess, about myself and applied it not only in work with my clients, which I did before, but now I kind of know it in my heart now, where I knew it in my head before, and now it's kind of moved those those few inches down into my person, where I've gone through these things too. So it's been difficult, but not impossible. And I think it's really helped kind of inform my work. And I wanted to share it with you because anytime I have something that happens in my life, I wonder how many other people are dealing with it as well. So basically, that's all I have for you today. I'm still in the process of doing my own work and will continue to. I want to encourage those of you that are thinking about the things that I just said and wondering, well, gosh, I have all of these responses, and that's okay. I want you to look at how much does it interfere with your life? How much does it interfere with your day-to-day being able to function? Because there is this kind of unfair thing that we have as autism parents where we got to have our stuff together. Our kids really feel the emotions that we're feeling. So during the time that I was not okay, I had to excuse myself from the room a lot. My son would feel my energy that I wasn't intending to even put out there, but he could tune into it. Right. So I just made sure that self-care was at an all-time high. And by self-care, I mean understanding, when I need to eat, when I need to drink, how long I can actually work, what I can actually expect out of myself. And so that had to come way down, which it did. And now I'm building back up. But I want to thank you guys for listening today. I would love to hear about your experiences if you want to share. We're going to be having a lot more experiences for you guys to connect with each other and with me very soon, and I'll tell you more about that in our next episode. But for now, I just want to thank you for listening, and see you next time.
The information in this podcast is not intended to be a substitute for help from a licensed mental health professional.